Over the last few decades, West Virginia has actually had some pretty decent quarterbacks. You had guys such as Pat White and Geno Smith, and then more recently, you had Will Grier. All three of them got a chance in the NFL, and were at minimum a really big deal in the college football world. But ever since Grier left campus, the Mountaineers have struggled to field a really good quarterback, and that's honestly been why I think they have struggled. They had failed experiments in Jarrett Doege, Austin Kendall, and most recently JT Daniels, and now, as they head into the 2023 season, Neal Brown is on the hot seat, and he needs to get the quarterback position right. He has a couple of options on the bench, but one guy in particular has way more potential than anyone else on the team, and in my opinion, needs to be the guy. His name is Nicco Marchiol. He was a big-time recruit coming out of high school, has pretty much unlimited potential in my eyes, and in my opinion, is the only chance that West Virginia really has at having a really good season. In today's video, I want to introduce you to who Nicco Marchiol is, go through his insane story in recruitment, and talk about why he is such a big deal for West Virginia. But before we get started, quickly be sure to leave a like if you want to support today's video, subscribe if you're new and love college football content, and let me know what player, team, topic, or quarterback I could cover next. Now, let's get started and talk about Nicco Marchiol. Going back in time, big-time football came natural for Nicco, in large part because he simply had that trait. He was the son of a former NFL linebacker in Ken Marchiol, and he was a student of the game that had been bred for a leadership role. At Regis Jesuit High School in Colorado, he threw for over 5,000 yards in 2 seasons and gained an early offer from Colorado. This made him somewhat of a local prodigy in the area, and Nicco was the next big thing in the area. But the left-handed signal caller moved southwest and eventually left the state of Colorado to move to Chandler, Arizona. This was the same school as former Texas Tech and Oregon quarterback Tyler Shuck, who was a really big deal then. He immediately became a big deal for his high school, as through 3 seasons there, he threw for 5,620 passing yards, 54 touchdowns, and 22 interceptions. He also added 932 yards and 18 scores on the ground. This led to plenty of big-time offers, and because of that, he blossomed into one of the top quarterback recruits in the country. He visited Florida, Arizona State, and Florida State, but eventually decided to choose the Seminoles. He credited their offensive coordinator Kenny Dillingham, who was an Arizona native, as to why he committed there. But, as we know, he eventually left Florida State and spent a year at Oregon as the OC, developing Bo Nix, before now becoming the head coach at Arizona State. Before all that happened though, Nicco eventually backed off his pledge to Florida State and had to find a new home. But first, he'd have one more insane season. As a senior, he was named the Arizona Gatorade Player of the Year after accounting for over 3,000 total yards of offense and 43 touchdowns. West Virginia's quarterbacks coach Sean Regan eventually extended him a scholarship offer at the end of April. At first, this didn't seem like a big deal, but just a couple weeks later, Marchiol elected to open things up at the beginning of June. He now decommitted from the Seminoles, and the Mountaineers wasted very little time going after him as they did not have a quarterback signed for their 2022 class. West Virginia needed a signal caller, and Marchiol now needed a new college destination. After June official visits to Michigan State, West Virginia, and Arizona State, he eventually made the call to commit to the Mountaineers, and he was going to be leaving the Southwest for the coal mining state of West Virginia. Why the Mountaineers? Well, he said, quote, "I think I've done a really good job of finding a place that really has a need for me and a place that I can really start a culture and build a winning culture around the team." After the commitment, Neal Brown was pumped. He said, quote, "I think he's going to be a guy that's going to be a fan favorite from day one. He's got charisma, and I think he's got strong leadership capabilities. He's a student of the game, and he absolutely loves football." Marchiol was a big-time commitment for West Virginia, as besides transfers, this was the best news they had gotten at the quarterback spot in seemingly a very long time. Personally, I'm trying to remember back to the last time they got a big-time quarterback recruit, and I just can't even think. Please let me know down below. What did scouts have to say? Well, they said, quote, "Marchiol does a good job of improvising when a play breaks down and makes big plays with his legs. He's very smooth in his throwing motion and has a good feel for dropping the ball over the receiver's shoulder, especially on fades in the back corner of the end zone. He's athletic enough to pick up yards down the field, has upside as a multi-year starter, and he could be an all-conference type performer and an NFL Draft Day 3 selection." That's pretty big hype, and according to 24/7 Sports, Nicco Marchiol was a 4-star recruit, the number 19 quarterback, and the 289th best player in the class of 2022. So, why was he the future of West Virginia football, and how would he do as a true freshman? Well, let's take a look. Quickly going back in time, Will Grier was there in 2018, and then when Neal Brown took over in 2019, they had to find a new quarterback. They brought in 2 transfers, one of which was a former big-time recruit in Austin Kendall from Oklahoma, and the other was Jarret Doege from Bowling Green. Both of those guys would get an opportunity to play in 2019, and neither really did that well. Kendall had 12 touchdowns, while Doege had 7 touchdowns. Kendall also had 10 interceptions, and overall, West Virginia was just not very good. 2020 wouldn't really get that much better, as Doege was now the full-time starter. He threw for 2,500 yards with 14 touchdowns and 4 picks. Not an awful season, but not really that great either. In 2021, Doege would once again become the starting quarterback, this time throwing for 19 touchdowns and 12 picks. By this time, they also had 2 somewhat talented quarterbacks on the roster in Garrett Greene and Will Crowder behind him, but 2022 is when Marchiol would finally arrive. You also saw JT Daniels come onto campus, and he was immediately named the starter, with Greene becoming the backup. Daniels threw for 2,100 yards with 13 touchdowns and 9 interceptions, and was largely a disappointment last year in the West Virginia uniform. Garrett Greene got a chance to fill in, and he finished with 5 touchdowns, with 5 more scores on the ground. He was more of a dynamic threat, but Nicco Marchiol is the guy who I think is the future. Last year, he would appear in 2 total games, throwing a touchdown against Towson, and then helping them to beat Oklahoma State 24-19. Last year, Marchiol didn't play much, and it was for a reason. The staff wanted to ensure that he wasn't forced into action too early, and by doing so, that would hurt his confidence. That's because if it happens early on at the position, it's often hard to get that confidence back, and once a player is broken, you typically don't fix them. Going into this year, the battle seems to be between Garrett Greene and Marchiol. It seems that right now Greene has a slight edge because he has more experience and is a little bit more of a dual threat player, but in my opinion, I think it's a little bit closer. What does Neal Brown have to say? Well, he said, quote, "We have a high belief in both of these guys, and I think we showed that by not going out and getting somebody in the portal in December or May." One West Virginia beat writer said, quote, "The hype surrounding Marchiol is warranted. We have to remember how young he is and that Greene is entering his 4th year in the program. I wouldn't be surprised if Greene begins the season as the starter and then Marchiol takes over if things don't go as planned. Honestly, that's how I see it going. Greene will probably start in that week 1 game against Penn State on the road because right now he's more battle tested and has more experience. You wouldn't want to kill Marchiol's confidence in week 1. The next 2 games are extremely pivotal. They play Pitt and Texas Tech at home. If they beat Duquesne in week 2 and somehow win both of those games, they go 3-1 into their matchup with TCU. If they go 1-2 in the Texas Tech and Pitt games, then at that point, then you start to wonder if Marchiol should be thrown into the mix, and if they lose both, I definitely say you begin to start him. At some point, the highly recruited player needs to play, and the guy who gives Neal Brown the best chance of making a bowl game is going to be under center. He knows he has a short leash and needs to win now, but the one thing that could save him during a bad or losing season could be the potential that Marchiol shows. And overall, the guy has great measurables, had insane high school stats, seemingly is sizzling with confidence, and just has a lot of pure talent. If he's properly developed, he could be that next great West Virginia quarterback, but for now, he's still a pretty major what if, and this season has a lot of question marks. I think Greene will start out the year, and by the end of it, Marchiol will be the guy, and he'll be fully ready to take over in 2024. But what do you guys think? If you're a West Virginia fan, what do you think of the quarterback battle? What do you think of Nicco Marchiol? And if you're a fan of another school, what team or quarterback should I take a look at next? Be sure to let me know down below. Leave a like if you want to support today's video, subscribe if you're new, and check out all my other videos on the end screen. I hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.